the Fiend, the whatever you want to call him, he's done in WWE. And it's honestly, Trevor, one of the saddest things that I've seen or I've had to like talk about and react to, and it's not only because the Fiend was one of my favorite characters. It's not only because Bray Wyatt was such a revolutionary like thinker in the way he thought about wrestling and producing this kind of stuff. It's because Trevor, this was someone who every time he would get a little bit of momentum, every time he would get a little bit of a push or interest in him, it just seemed like for some reason something got in the way and interrupted every big moment he had. And we'll talk about that more in depth, I guess, in a little bit. But what was your initial reaction? Because we all saw my initial reaction. It was not great. You can check that out in the archives. But what was your initial reaction when you saw or heard the news of The Fiend getting released?
So I had two reactions. And mind you, the first reaction was initially it was like good for him because they're not using him. They're not using him all. They weren't using him right. But that was the internal reaction. The external reaction was, again, mind you, I was at a family reunion around kids and everything, and I look at my phone and I'm like, that's a bunch of bullshit. And so having a 3-year-old repeat that was not good, but it still doesn't change how I felt. Like, you have a wrestler that had so much potential. You had a artist, if you would call him, because I believe these guys that do these characters and come up with this style are artists because they have to mold this character, mold themselves to fit this character. They have to do all these bits and pieces to make this art come to life on screen. So in this particular foyer, I'm going to call him artist. He was an artist, and what he was able to do on screen was amazing. Like, he had people actually afraid, because of this character. Because like you have, if you've ever been to New Orleans, you have these creepy people. Like, that's what he was. He was like a voodoo guy from New Orleans that had a cult following. And his style, his way of talking, his way of walking was all like cultivated to fit this character. And I'm sure he did a lot of horror research or just watch people from the bayou of New Orleans. This character leaps and bounds was beyond his time, before his time. And you give him a push, you give him, it was enough. It was to me, it was enough is enough. At this point, that might be the straw that broke my back, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, this was so disheartening as a fan to hear about, because Trevor, there's been a lot of problems we've talked about. There's been a lot of problems with the way WWE's been booking, with the way WWE's been presenting stuff on TV, and a lot of it, especially on the Raw brand, which is where Bray Wyatt was for a while, was bad. And the issue, sorry, not the issue, but what I kind of came back to was one of the things that kept me going, that and I talked to you about this. I'd be watching Raw all 3 hours, brutalizing myself for all 3 hours, gouging my eyes out. And I'd just be waiting for one 3-minute segment that would make it all worth it. And it was the Firefly Funhouse with Bray Wyatt. It was whatever promo he was going to cut there, whatever match he was going to have, whatever Bray Wyatt was going to do. That's the only reason I felt motivated to watch Raw that whole time. We talked about it. One of the only Raw matches we were interested at WrestleMania for was Wyatt's return. That was for me. Like, if we're talking about Raw matches, that was the one I was most, probably only excited about. Like, and that's not, I'm not trying to disparage anyone else. Bobby Lashley, Drew McIntyre, they had great matches. Bad Bunny showed out. But at the same time, this was a gimmick that had people talking. It was a gimmick that had people interested. And it's a gimmick that was bigger than the way WWE, I think, wanted to present it. And that ended up being the problem. And when you're talking about Bray Wyatt's release, the fact that WWE, you want to call it budget cuts, you want to call it whatever, we'll get into that later too. But the fact that WWE, for some reason, for some reason thought that this was someone who was expendable. That this guy, who no matter what shit you threw at him, he would grab it, turn to lemonade, or actually, you know what would happen really? Bray Wyatt would come to them with lemonade, and then they would find a way to turn it into lemons. But the fact that they couldn't find a way to make it work, it's baffling and it's scary. It's genuinely scary. And look, you want to criticize me as someone who doesn't like the WWE product? There's a lot of things to like. There's a lot of things not to like. And the way they handle talent like Bray Wyatt is one of the biggest things not to like. Because the fact that they weren't able to make this work, the fact that they alienated him, the fact that they ruined his gimmicks multiple times. And he was still able to recover from all that. And at the end of the day, what happens? They give his gimmick to Alexa Bliss. No shame on Alexa Bliss. I love her. I've always said that she's one of my favorite performers, period. But the fact that they gave his gimmick away and then released him, it shows you how little they care. And this is the one thing out of all of these releases, one thing I've been saying consistently is WWE is not a family. WWE is not a place where they care about their employees, where they take care of their talent. WWE is a corporation that only cares about money. And look, at the end of the day, any company is about money. I get that. But when you're talking about being the global leader in whatever you do, because you don't do wrestling, that's one thing that's for sure. You don't do wrestling. When you're talking about being the global leader in presenting a wrestling product, allegedly, you can't tell me. You can't justify all of these releases and during this time, and above all, this one. This one is the most shocking. It's the most disparaging and disheartening. And also, honestly, it's the one that shows that anyone, literally anyone on this roster is expendable to WWE. Thanks for watching this video from Real Take Sports Talk. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. Also remember to check out our live show every single Thursday at 8 p.m. right here on the YouTube channel. And remember, keep it real.